Assalamu alaikum. Happy Ramadan. So here I am at the Serve a Meal Kitchen live. And what we want to talk about is some of the benefits of fasting. But before we get into it, I just want to give a plug for Serve a Kitchen and BDesh, particularly because of the good work that they're doing. And what we want to do is sort of give people some knowledge about Ramadan and the benefits of fasting, answer some medical questions, but also understand that food is such a critical part in people's lives. We are taking for granted in many cases about what we eat, when we're going to eat, but many other people have to be sort of given some help here. But at BDesh and the Serve a Meal Kitchen, in order for sustainability, what I understand is that not only do they serve to the community that need it for free, whether it's in DC or locally around the corner, but also the people actually can purchase food here and all the proceeds go towards feeding those people in need. So BDesh is offering a very, very good service, and I want to be part of that. And here I want to, educate you about this blessed day, month of Ramadan, how you can actually maximize both your medical health, but also some of the pitfalls that people may fall into when it comes to Ramadan, right? So, fasting, everybody knows, is good for you, but oftentimes we want to see what is it about fasting that really helps with health. So some of the studies that actually showed that fasting, we could describe it as either caloric restriction, that means very low calories over several days, and some people describe that as intermittent fasting diet. So it's like fasting, but it's intermittent. That means for a period of time in a 24-hour period, you're fasting, and other times you're actually eating. So one of those studies was where for 5 consecutive days, people are on this intermittent fasting diet. And after those 5 days, they actually went on their regular meal for the rest of the month. This particular 5-day system, they followed for 2-3 consecutive months. And at the end of which, they found people's blood pressure dropped, inflammation marker dropped, their circumference around the waist dropped, their blood pressure dropped. So all the regular common medical problems that we deal with, hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, these are the crux of 80% of primary care, and those are the things that intermittent fasting was proven to do. Now, of course, during Ramadan is different. Why is it different? Because we are not drinking water. We are not drinking or eating anything for a period of time. So when fasting starts around 5:45, something like that, and it ends at 7:35 for now, this is a period of total fasting. And some people call that timed feeding, because during that period of time, you're not going to eat. The rest of the time, you can actually eat. That's where the pitfall might be. But let's talk about those 14 hours. Roughly 14 hours, that's not bad. So all the studies show that, when you're fasting intermittently, whether it's time feeding or intermittent fasting, 14 hours is a good amount. 12 is not bad, but 14 is good. And as you extend that to 16 or more, then you really get what we call some of the benefits of fasting, which is to recycle old cells and make them new. We call that autophagy. And some of those mechanisms also turn down inflammation. So fasting is something that, is great. So during the day, you have no question. But the problem is when people break the fast, it's important to understand what is it about fasting that's so good for you, and breaking the fast is critically important. Before I start that, I want to actually give you an analogy. Just recently I heard khutbahs where they emphasized the preparation, the ablution before the prayer, the cleansing before the prayer, the wudu. And so in most cases, we do our obligatory hands, mouth, nose, face, but the aim of that is part of our prayer to get into the mindset of the real prayer. But the ablution, the wudu is part of that, and we should become more conscious of the preparation for the prayer. In the same way, what we think of fasting is like getting into a state and then can't wait until it's over. And what we should actually be thinking is that when the fasting is over, we should be in a different state. So whilst we're fasting, we're careful about uttering bad words. Whilst we're fasting, we're careful about not watching bad things. Whilst we're fasting, we're paying a lot of attention. And so when we end the fast, the fasting is not over. Yes, the actual fasting is over, but the essence of the fasting is not over. In other words, how we conduct ourselves and how we break that fast should be also a part of that fasting. What do I mean by that? So let's look at some of the benefits of fasting, right? The reason why we get these benefits is that when you're fasting, you're actually turning off what we call nutrient sensing pathways. When you eat carbohydrates, it turns on a pathway called AMPK. When you eat protein, it turns off in a pathway called mTOR. When you eat fat, it turns on a different pathway. So all these pathways, if you're not eating, are turned off. That is the science behind longevity. When you don't have pathways for growth, your body conserves and activates many other things for survival. Some of those things are actually longevity genes. Those are described as sirtuins. And so in the short term, these nutrient sensing pathways are to nourish you, but the science shows, we're talking about mature people here. We're not talking about young children, adolescents in their growth spurts in the 20s. We're talking about mature people after the age of 30, all the way till their old age. And we're talking about, adults. So those pathways are turned off during fasting. And those are the benefits. So when you're refeeding yourself, it's time for iftar, how you break it is probably the most important part of iftar. Most important part of when you end your fast, how you break it. So when you break it, if you understand those pathways, so if you're having sugar, you actually activate what's called IGF-1. I said AMPK, actually IGF-1. It's like an insulin-like growth factor, which is measurable, which reflects growth hormone, actually. So when you're eating, you activate growth hormone. And that's fine in short amounts. But if you constantly eat, then it gets a negative feedback, right? So many of the things that we have in our bodies are designed for good health and function, but not in the way that we have. Even 3 meals a day may actually turn out to be too much, but that may be a little controversial for this episode. So we will just discuss the healthy way of doing what you usually do, and then we can then push the envelope on the next go around to try to stretch that. Look, if you get into this great lifestyle during this month of Ramadan, this physical discipline, this emotional discipline, this the nutrition discipline, you should continue that. And after all, that is what Ramadan is for, right? That this is the practice, this is the cleansing phase, this is the thing where you ask for what you want, and Allah will help us achieve that, make it easy for us. So if the nutrient sensing pathways are the keys to growth, but we do too much of it, that's where the problems come into it. And if you restrict your food, then you turn off those pathways. So when you break your fast, you're going to turn on those pathways again. And so the worst way to break a fast is refined sugars. Similar to refined sugars is if you break your fast with carbohydrates, like a whole pile of bread or rice. So I'm going to tell you ways to get around it. But I want you to understand that if you break your fast with carbohydrates, you're going to turn on IGF-1, which is one of the major pathways we just turned off for 14 hours. Now, the next pathway is for protein. If you eat protein, and we'll go over healthy protein in a minute, but you turn on what we call mTOR. mTOR is good for growing muscles, but even that can actually, in large amounts, also negate the 15, 14 hours of fasting. However, you can break your fast with fat. Now, we have to be a little bit creative about how we break our fast with fat, but I just want to let you know that when you break your fast with fat, you're actually not breaking your fast. You can only break your fast in a bad way by putting a lot of refined carbohydrates. So what's the perfect kind of food is something with chickpeas. Chickpeas you can make into something like hummus. You can use chickpeas flour, we call that ground flour. And you could use that as part of a pakora if you saute in olive oil or coconut oil. So there are many ways to do that. So the most important thing about it is that when you're breaking the fast, don't think of it as like my fasting is over, I can eat whatever I want, and you will maybe undo all the good work that you did. So if you can just hold off and break your fast with some chickpeas or some other condiments which doesn't involve bread and sugars like ruafsa. And for diabetics, I'm going to spend a few extra minutes in a minute about how diabetics should break their fast. That once you've broken the fast, you can go and do your salah. That's 15 minutes, 30 minutes already gone. Then you should actually have your main meal. One of the problems that people have with iftar is that they have a spread. And I'm okay with that. But how you spread that out may really make an impact in the quality of the breaking the fast. So all those benefits of down-regulating those growth pathways, if you are too quick at just diving in with all the, even excessive fruits can turn on IGF-1, which is too much growth factor. So, too much fruits, if you have too many things with potatoes in it, if you have too much with bread in it. So my point is you can eat those with your main meal if that's what you're used to. But what my point is that have your main meal, which is really where the substance of your meal should come from, and not the snacks, the samosas, the pakoras, although that's made out of gram flour, right? So you can actually make a healthy pakora if you're careful. So let's talk about fasting again. That I think that just like the month of Ramadan should be a spiritual thing, I think that the health benefits that you're getting through your self-discipline, through the fact that you're controlling your body all day long, don't break it so rapidly. Try to think of it as a period of refeeding. In fact, that is what the science tells us, that when you are down-regulating those pathways and then you're ready to refeed, that's when the body can use the good nutrients to take advantage of all the sort of restrictions that your body went through. And so it's very important, just try to eat clean, try to eat homemade food, try not to eat things which are heavily refined. So even homemade food, people tend to eat a little bit too much when it comes to bread and rice or chapati or whatever like that. So listen, I want to take a moment to kind of give you an example what the kitchen's all about. So we're going to take a little walk into the kitchen. There's a couple of dishes that's out there which I think is a complete meal. Now, of course, people are going to make funny faces at me if I tell them that this could be a complete meal. To me, a complete meal means complex carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are the three major food groups. But the question is, they're not going to be refined. They're going to be from the raw source. That means it should look like the real food. So we're going to go into the kitchen right now. So just a couple of dishes that we got right here. There's a lot of people working in the background, but we're going to focus right here. So this is Haleem right here. And Haleem, I'm going to describe it once I put the lid back down. Haleem, and the other dish so that we don't bother these people, this is chickpeas. All right? And what the people here working so hard, what they're doing is they're going to get this stuff ready, have it packaged up, because there are people who are going to purchase some of these meals, and then from there, the proceeds go to a good cause. So we're going to go back out to the front area and just to go back into the kitchen periodically and show you in future episodes, some of the things, some of the good work that they're doing over here. So what you saw, there were two dishes. One was chickpeas, and the other one is Haleem. Both of them are made with a variety of what we call lentil family, right? Legumes. Legumes are high in nitrates. Legumes are high quality protein. What they say about animal protein and vegetable protein is that when you have animal protein like goat or lamb or beef, that is the perfect essential amino acids. And when it comes to vegetable protein, those are also equally good, but you may have to combine several types of vegetable protein to make what we call the essential amino acids. But the thing about essential amino acids is this: chickpeas is one of those essential amino acids, which is just like meat. So that's one of the proteins that I think we should be concentrating on. So I could hold this for a second if you want. No, you're good. Okay, so the meal that we talked about here, Haleem, that's my favorite. What I mean by that is that in your Haleem dish, you have your base of your beef, so you get your lean beef. But in it, you have chickpeas, you've got different types of lentils, some people put a little barley, and so it's really a whole bunch of grains that are combined together to create a very nourishing meal. And so Haleem is really what I consider a complete meal, because what it has is proteins, it has complex carbohydrates. In fact, chickpeas is a complex carbohydrate in a way, because from the chickpeas, you've got the ideal protein, the shell has the fibers, so it's really a complete meal. And so when you put the whole grains in, the problem with bread is that it's refined. So some people say, what about whole wheat bread? The problem with whole wheat bread is that first it's refined and then they put the fibers in it. So that's a problem, because in a way they've broken the integrity of the grain. And by breaking the integrity of the grain, you've refined it. And the fibers they put in is put in after the fact. It's not as the grain is being made. Same with oats. Oats is a very good fiber. It definitely has more fiber, soluble, insoluble, compared to other grains. But the problem of the quick oats is that it's refined. And unlike a steel cut, which is literally a grain cut in half, and that takes a lot longer to prepare. So the steel grain oats has a lower glycemic index than oats that are quick. And the reason that is because the steel cut are unrefined. It's in the original form, it takes a lot longer to cook, and all the nutrients are around it. So in the same way, when you have what we call flour with fiber, or they call it bread and whole grain bread, the problem is that it isn't the grain that's been prepared right away. It's flour that's already been refined with the fiber that's been added. And so we're going to go back to the kitchen again. Yeah, we could do that. I mean, we can go back and see what they're doing. So some of the things that they're doing in there, where they're making some other traditional dishes, I think that's really because the people are demanding that. And, in some ways, you have to give people what they want so that their proceeds can go towards feeding other people in need. But we'll go back into the kitchen in a minute. But the food, I think, is something that is something that we can spend a lot more time discussing, just like the Mediterranean diet. One of the reasons why the Mediterranean diet is so successful, it's not purely from the olive oil, although there are many benefits. It's the fact that people spend a lot of time around the whole culture of their meal. And that means a 2-hour lunch maybe, or a meal with the family. And it's that whole holistic approach to it. And that's what probably is the benefit from the Mediterranean meal. So food is a very social thing, and you can see that you can hear noises coming in. That's because people are coming in, getting ready to break their fast. And what happens is that people come in and they're chatting and getting to know each other. So I think that's kind of the thing we should be also doing. Like maybe during this month, we can get into the habit of sitting with the family during the iftar, which is a good habit that we should maybe continue after Ramadan, where we sit with the family, embrace it, and try to really enjoy it. Otherwise, we have what we have. We have fussy kids that don't want to eat this, and they're in a hurry. And, I'm a culprit too, so I like to watch TV. So all those are gone during this month. So let's hope that we can maintain this. So I think we're going to go to the kitchen and just look again at some of the things that they do. So we'll do a little bit of a panoramic view. But, I think the chickpeas is one of those phenomenal things universally liked by everybody, whether it's the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East and the Persian subcontinent. And, Haleem is something that I think that people can take a twist on it. And frankly, someone can just call it a soup. That's okay with me. So whether it's a stew, whether it's a soup, or it's a Haleem, the concept is when you're mixing all these whole foods together, you're really getting a complete meal. And so you don't have to think about rice and a curry. You don't have to think about naan and butter chicken. You really should think about mixing things up. And so, back in the kitchen, you see the people here are preparing around the outside of the kitchen. And when it all comes together, they're sort of be prepared in the middle over here. And as I said, when I lifted this up, I could really smell the aroma, the Haleem. You can smell it. It's really nourishing. It's very filling. So you can be satisfied. One of the things about people on diets and caloric restriction, whether it's the salads, is that they're very unsatisfied. They're not satisfied at the end of the meal, and that's a problem. If you're part of a healthy meal plan and you're not satisfied with your meal, that's why healthy fats are such an important part. So some of the examples of healthy fats, as you already know, maybe coconut oil or olive oil or real coconuts and real olives. They're great. Avocados, nuts and seeds, So one of the things I was alluding to is that when you're starting your fast and you start with a whole bunch of bread, you're really starting with a very, very bad way. And that's unfortunate. I'm telling you from a health perspective, from a scientific perspective. Now, if people are culturally attuned in a certain way, we've got to help re-educate and help them adjust over time. But in the short term, some of the things that don't interfere with the way you start your fast is if you have something that's highly fatty. So if you had a dish that had avocados in it with some cucumber. So let's talk some more out here, because people are really busy doing the things that are necessary before iftar time. So I know it's very difficult for the morning time, suhoor time, to have something very nutritious that is also satisfying. But my point is that, if in a regular meal, you have a breakfast, lunch, dinner, which I'm going to redefine for people, sorry about that. But breakfast is not always the best meal of the day. Let's come over this way. because breakfast means to break fast. There are so many health benefits of fasting that if you are going to start the month of Ramadan and you're going to start with suhoor, I'm okay with that. But don't start your suhoor with a date, which is a refined carbohydrate. One manjun date is equivalent to 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's almost 14 grams of sugar, and it's refined. So for a diabetic, what I was alluding to is that diabetics shouldn't follow the typical meal that somebody else who's non-diabetic. Let me explain myself. A lot of people explain that it's sunnah to have a date. I'm okay with that. But during the days of the Prophet, there weren't many diabetics. But now we're in a different age. So we can still get the sunnah, but don't break your fast with a date. Don't start your fast with a date. What you want to do is start the food with a protein. Start it with fats, natural fats. And then in the middle of the meal, at the end of the meal, have your date. So you can get the benefits of the food that we're describing. But when you break your fast, do not break it with refined carbs. When you start your fast, do not start your fast with refined carbs. Try to do like the chickpeas. Try to do the Haleem. Well, there you go. There's my answer. You know, when you have a month that is so kind of compact, that means that you start your fast, then you go to work, you have your 5 prayers, you are active in the daytime, you finish your fast, you have to do your Maghrib, then you have to go to Taraweeh, and then it's time to bed, you wake up for Tahajjud, some people. It's a very, very, very tight schedule. So in a tight schedule, what should you do? Meal prep. Meal prep is don't spend all your efforts on a lavish iftar. I know some people have the means to maybe cater in a restaurant, but you're missing the whole point of Ramadan is that discipline, that physical discipline, that thirst discipline, that discipline where Allah is telling you it's for Him and for Him you're doing it. It doesn't stop when you break your fast. You should continue that mindset. And so it really is worth your while to capture the whole benefit of lowering the blood pressure, lowering the sugar, if you can maintain this kind of strategy for many, many more days, obviously for the month. But you know, the strategy is to understand that what we're doing is that as much as the fasting is important, how you start the fast and how you break it is important. And meal prepping in advance to mix things together, whether it's a stir fry, it depends on your taste, whether it's Haleem or in some cases a stew. The whole principle is mixing the proteins, mixing the carbs, mixing the grains. Whole grain is okay for some people as opposed to refined grain. So that's kind of why I think that it's so important to talk about food, because it's something that's such a personal thing. It's something that, look, I'm looking forward to breaking my fast. I told my friends here that, listen, I'm really looking forward to coming to do a little presentation because I like their tea so much. Now you're going to say in that tea there's sugar. So what I do is I usually walk around with a little bit of stevia so I don't have to add as much sugar. But remember, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 5 grams. If you have 30 grams of carbs, then you're starting to break your fasting. So in other words, if you have carbs and you can keep it down below 30 grams, you may not actually break what we call fasting. In other words, the cell programming is still activated on a fasting program. So what I just described is a very profound statement. We just talked about cell reprogramming. Those pathways for carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism are called nutrient sensing pathways. And those nutrient sensing pathways are part of how cells are programmed. In the same way, you can actually reprogram your cells, and that's how I believe that you get reduced inflammation, you get reduced blood pressure, you get reduced blood sugars and reduced cholesterol, because you're actually reprogramming the cells if you can maintain the healthy fasting. And that healthy fasting means when you're breaking the fast, it's not over. What you should really do is enjoy your meal, really. I don't want you to deprive yourself. I want you to be satisfied. But it's very clear that people become satisfied when they have enough fat in their diet. So you can get fat from any plant source, right? And that's one way. Plant sources means your seeds and so forth, the olives and olive oil and coconuts. But you can also be satisfied by having what we call beans and lentils. There's such a variety of those, and mixing them any which way you want. Obviously, green leafy vegetables, there's nothing wrong with that at all. High in vitamin K1. Those fibers actually feed the bacteria in your gut, which is really an essential component of how I think the body reduces inflammation. The other part is that when you're breaking your fast and you're eating these food groups, I think you just need to think about the water. Just drink water for what it is. Don't break it with ruah afza or we call lemonade or sharbat, where you're adding sugar into it. And even if you add honey. So let's talk about diabetics real quick. So why is it that a group of diabetics who are on medicine can't fast? And the answer is there is no reason why. So before we start that, why don't we just talk about somebody who's not taking medicine but maybe borderline diabetic? Well, then there should be no danger of fasting because if anything, your sugar is going to be high. The reason why a diabetic may be cautious, and even a physician may be cautious about advising a diabetic on medication not to fast, is because the whole idea of the medicine is to drive the sugar down. But why would we need to drive the sugar down if we never put it into the body in the first place? So the whole principle is that we are increasing our diet, so we have to match it either with our own pancreas. When our pancreas can't match the insulin demand, then we need extra help. So if you consume more than your pancreas can handle, that's when the medicine pushes more insulin out of your pancreas. So the principle is really simple. If during the fasting period, you're not putting the food in, which I told you, don't start iftar, don't start suhoor with bread and rice. Have haleem, have chickpeas. Don't make it a big meal. Your breakfast was not a big meal in the first place, correct? And now, because it's suhoor, you've converted it. I hope you haven't. So if you're not consuming a whole bunch of bread and rice, there's no need to take your medicine. So for a diabetic, and now, of course, consult your physician before you take any advice. What I'm giving you is for information, education purposes, but I am a real physician, so my advice can be taken quite seriously, which is that if you're reducing the intake, then you don't need to take as much medicine. Reduce your medication, except for, say, like metformin. Metformin doesn't pump more insulin out of your pancreas. It makes the insulin that you have in your body more sensitive. We call that insulin sensitivity. And there are even other drugs out there called GLP receptor agonists like Januvia and semaglutide, which is what's the name of the semaglutide? Ozempic. The Trulicity. These medicines improve insulin sensitivity, but don't actually make your body produce extra insulin, nor are they external insulin. So they don't make your blood sugars go down into what we call hypoglycemic. So now even in a diabetic that is taking insulin, the principle is when they're eating, they have to take just as much insulin. They eat more, they take more insulin. So if you eat less, you need less insulin. There's your answer. So work out something with your physician, what we call a titration. If we eat more, we take more insulin. If you eat less, you take less insulin. But there is no reason that to be on anything. So my principle is, if it was my patient, I wouldn't have them on short-acting insulin because by definition, I don't want it to go up and down in the short term. What I would do is use only the long-acting and reduce the dosage, and then they're not eating in the morning, and much that is, and throughout the day they're not eating, and only when they break their fast. So that's something a little bit more specialized, but what I'm trying to convey to you is that if you don't put some in, then you don't need the insulin. And if you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, if you're putting in less, put less insulin in. That's something that your doctor can advise you. And for me, it's very, very simple. So if people want to learn about, if you have underlying cardiac problem, underlying thyroid problem, underlying diabetic problem, you're on prescription medication, your doctor is not giving you helpful advice, but you really want to fast, then I'm your guy. So at Next Health, because we understand how the body works, we understand how these medicines work, we understand how to get around them, how to get your body to become more insulin sensitive, how your body can make nitric oxide to open your arteries and lower your blood pressure naturally. Because we understand that we can not only support you from a meal point of view, a lifestyle point of view, but we can also help you regulate your medicines so you can get the full advantage of Ramadan without being worried about the consequences of your underlying medical problem or the medications you're taking for them. At Next Health, we can go into these details. So if people are interested in learning more, they can just message us and we'll be happy to respond. So nexthealthmed.com. That's nexthealthmed.com. Or you can just message us at 703-724-4000, 703-724-4000. And our website is www.nexthealthmed.com. So keep that in mind because that is something that comes up over and over. And in many cases, I try to gently advise people that, look, take a step back. Ask yourself, what is it that your medical problem? Ask yourself, what are these medicines really doing? And when you understand that, whether it's thyroid medicine, whether it's diabetic medicine, whether it's certainly blood pressure, cholesterol medicine, there's no doubt about it that they should not interfere with your month of Ramadan at all. And if you have any doubts, any fears, reach out to us directly and we'll be happy. And then follow us, because we'll be doing a little bit more of these educational programs, I believe, at least on a weekly basis. And maybe if it's something that's of value that people can continue, we can continue past that, because I think food is such an important area for socializing, for family, and not least your health. And so one of the biggest messages, that analogy, like in preparation for your prayer, you're doing your wudu. The wudu is your prayer. In preparation for, after your fasting, in preparation for your iftar, that is your Ramadan. That is part of your fasting. So my advice, humble opinion, just friendly advice, that all the benefits of down-regulating those growth pathways, when you're up-regulating them, if you feed your body the right foods, then you can rebuild your body. So real quick, what happens when you fast? In addition to what I mentioned, you actually increase your growth hormone. Your growth hormone is being increased at multiple folds when you're not eating. Just like your longevity gene, because when you're not eating, your body was trying to survive. It's trying to sustain. So as a result, it liberates the most abundant amino acid called leucine. So ironically, when people think they're fasting, you feel tired. I've been fasting all day, and I keep touching my mic. I've been fasting all day because I'm excited to talk to you and share this knowledge. I'm really not feeling hungry. I'm really not feeling thirsty. By day, I was actually on a Sunday working in my office. So staying busy and doing things for good reasons is a really easy way to pass your day. And my point is that during the fasting, if you're upregulating growth hormone and you're releasing amino acids, and then when it comes to breaking in the fast, don't break that by having refined carbs. Don't break that. So if you're a diabetic, for sure, do not break your fast with dates. Wait till later in the meal. And for other people, nobody says you have to eat a whole big date. Eat a bite of it, because even a date is a refined carb. Again, much better than having refined sugar, no doubt about it. Many minerals, many more nutrients, because it's a macro wholesome food. But again, as I keep saying to people, that the whole month, the whole day of fasting has activated so many wonderful hormones and amino acids and down-regulate some of those genes. So when you are ready to rebuild yourself, these foods are the building blocks of rebuilding yourself. So hopefully I gave a little teaser, a little idea about underlying medical problems that really you don't have to be afraid of when you're fasting. And frankly, during the day, if you stay active, you won't feel the hunger. Frankly, the people are hungry because their body, because of Pavlovian is where because of the timing, you're so used to your breakfast at a certain time. You're so used to your lunch at a certain time. You're so used to your dinner at a certain time that your body's already been reprogrammed. You're breaking that right now. You're breaking it right now. And so I need you to understand that this is the value of Ramadan. All the things you take for granted, you have to rethink it, right? You have to rethink everything. And so it's good to not crave to get back into a routine, but that this disruption is so that you rethink it and you have a new strategy. And so the other thing I want to mention is that why it's so dangerous to have your iftar and drag it out and then take your time and do your namaz. And some people stand for Isha in the community and do Taraweeh. Some people don't. But the danger of not standing and promptly getting on with your ibadah is that if you keep on grazing as you're eating later and later into the day or the night, you're breaking what we call the circadian rhythm. So you know that by night, melatonin goes up. And if it doesn't go up, then you have more insulin resistance. So the people who eat late at night, there's a great danger that you're going to break your circadian rhythm. You're not going to activate melatonin. And so it's important that you finish your meal very shortly after Maghrib. Have your meal. have your iftar and your meal together. That's my humble opinion. If you need more clarification on that, we can discuss that a little bit more. Just have it, be done with it. You're less likely to want to snack because there's no time to sit in front of the TV. There's no time. And when you come back from your prayer, don't have your relaxation time. I think that this is where you've got to get into your mindset. I wanted to say a few encouraging words for children because, it's so important that as we are doing this for adults, if we are still doing the same Ramadan that we've always done, we haven't made an improvement. We as adults, hopefully, have made incremental improvement. So we have to really compliment young people. I'm talking about people who are 13 or younger, 14, 15. Sure, even 18, 20-year-olds, in my mind, they're still young adults. You have to really be extra nice to these people because not only are they fasting, but I want them to see that it's more than just a fast. Now, if they don't see that in the older folks, and I suppose I'm an older folk in a way, but the principle is that, as Imam Majid said once, if all you remember is hunger and thirst during the month of Ramadan, you failed. I think the principle, what he's saying is that hunger and thirst is part of the process. And during that process, how we talk, how we look at things, how we behave, how we conduct ourselves is part of our religion. And I think how we break our fast, how we eat is part of our religion. And don't compensate at night what you did, the opposite of what you did by day. Because really, strictly speaking, if you're going to eat calories, you should be in the daytime. You've restricted by day. Don't overdo it by night. And the other thing, as I said, when you start your fast, don't think you're going to stock up. So let me give you the science behind that. Why people think that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So a suhoor may be classified as a breakfast. It is not the most important meal of the day. That is not me saying don't do suhoor. Do suhoor. I drink water. If anything, I would take a bite of something. But frankly, I would get up, I would have suhoor, and then I start my fast. But the reason why you do not need to stock up with your bread or your rice, you don't need to stock up with anything actually. Because if you ate nothing, your liver would break down glycogen and release as much glucose as it needed. If all the reserves of glycogen are gone, it's doubtful if you can break down all the reserves of glycogen in 24 hours. It would take days for most people. And the more storage you have inside your body, not least your fat, the more storage you have inside the muscle fibers, inside the liver, some people call that fatty liver, those are where glycogen, and that's one of the ways you can reverse fatty liver disease. If you can break down the stores in your liver, that's how you reverse fatty liver. And how you do it? Fasting. Don't eat carbohydrates. And in fact, even fruits, which is fructose. If you have fatty liver disease, you should really refrain from having fruit because fruits having high in fructose are metabolized only in the liver. If you already have fatty liver disease, that's a real problem. And so there are fruits which are less glycemic, like berries, like blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries. Those are acceptable. But my principle is that, apples and oranges and pineapple and mangoes and grapes, these are highly glycemic and they are fructose, and your liver will be hammered if you already have fatty liver disease. So really, it's getting busy right now. So we're going to kind of wrap this up. And so stay tuned this time next week. I believe we may move it to a Saturday, but stay tuned. So we want to talk about the health benefits of fasting, but also how to break the fast. And when we break the fast, that we should really think of it in a very holistic way, just like we've been holistic all day long and have been very diligent and thoughtful and mindful. We should continue to be thoughtful and mindful and conduct ourselves in a way even when iftar is over. All right, thanks very much for joining. Hope we see each other next time.